Actually, you all have created a great segue. Dr. Crumb is going to talk a little bit more in depth about what is racial trauma, how do we recognize it, and then Dr. Crumb, if you could also speak to that part about generational trauma and how we often show up very aware of our own identities and what that means, but we also carry our grandma's experiences, and I carry my dad's experiences, so I very much resonate with you, Sonia. So I'll pass it to you, Dr. Crumb.
Okay, so much, so much. I'm writing and I'm trying to like cap all of my feedback, and I know my colleagues will jump in. But I just want to start right now with just setting the base. I cannot assume that everybody knows the definition of trauma, what trauma entails. And I also believe that we can get lost because there are multiple definitions based upon your background and your discipline area. So I found one that I find that is pretty encompassing and leaves space to insert your personal perception. So understanding trauma. Trauma is damage or injury to the psyche after living through that's either experiencing or indirectly experiencing an extremely frightening or distressing event that may result in challenges in functioning and coping normally after the event. Okay. And then trauma can show up physically, psychologically, socially, emotionally, and behaviorally. All types of things. Think about how when someone has a traumatic event, some people may isolate. Some people may do something totally out of the norm. Some people may stop eating. Some people may overeat. Right. And so what we learned yesterday, I was actually in the audience of a racial healing group yesterday. And the presenters talked about in-depthly the direct relationship between trauma and health, especially racial trauma and health, because what we know is a lot of high blood pressure, health issues, different things, migraine, headaches, just this heightened stress from what's going on or worrying about our children, the safety of our children or our parents or our spouses causes traumatic stress. One other thing that I would love to share with the audience, we've been counselors. It may not look like it because of our youth, but we've been counselors for quite a long time. And with the advancement of social media and the news picking up almost every single event, I have seen over the last years just this more vicarious impact of what we call vicarious trauma, seeing the actual videos of police killings or shootings and violence, seeing this happen, kids having it on their phones, the news media playing it. The top of the news hour, the middle of the news hour, and the end of the news hour. Just this overconsumption of seeing these people die right there. And especially if you have something in common with them, if you are the same race, if you are a male, if you are an immigrant and you see people at the border struggling, right, and separated from their kids, there's a level of empathy, an impact that immigrants have in North Carolina with what's going on at the bordering states that can be traumatizing to them. And so I just want everybody to understand that you do not have to directly experience the event to have a psychological adverse effect or reaction to the trauma. There are many symptoms of trauma. One that, as Sonia was speaking, when she talks about generational trauma, another word that can really capture that is distrust. Distrust in people, distrust in symptoms, and that stuff runs deep. We're taking it back to the Tuskegee experiment, and we're talking about COVID, but you see how deep that distrust runs. The ability to distrust to not trust vaccines because of what has happened to people in the past, which is very valid, right? These people have a right to feel that way, because this is nothing that we're making up. These are things that were done to our people. Okay, so first, do not discount and don't say that this was a long time ago. This actually occurred. And we usually come from a critical race perspective, I will say that, or critical perspective, saying that when things are in fact, we don't question it. We will not go back and forth to say, well, racism doesn't exist, this doesn't exist. No, 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 it does. And we will start all of our presentations with that understanding that we don't take time to question whether racism exists. We know that it does. And that's one thing that we know is true. So when you talk about generational trauma, that's what I think about, the long-term, a curious journalist, the distrust that we've had in systems and in people, particularly since we're here and we're going to be very blunt, in white people with power, right? And who have misused that power. Not like being white makes you inherently bad. It's how people have historically misused that power to harm others is what is the issue. And I need that to be heard by everybody. It's not one thing that makes people inherently bad. It's the misuse of power that makes inherently bad people and do inherently bad things to other people that last from generations to generations, right? But everybody has the ability to unlearn, right? Everybody has the ability to unlearn this, right? And that goes both ways. That goes to the oppressed and the oppressor. Both of us have something to do. All of us have a duty when we're talking about racial trauma and racial healing. For the oppressed, some of us have been socially conditioned to hate certain groups. As soon as we were 2, 3, 4 years old, we knew who our parents may have told us who not to associate with. I mean, we have stories after stories after stories from having these conversations and doing these presentations with others, how people have been conditioned to hate other groups just because. So these people have not even had the opportunity to establish relationships of their own to learn about people. So someone talked about exposure, right? And systems are set up that way. Schools have been set up that way to keep kids from learning together, from showing that we're all human. And these systems are still in place right now. And a lot of times social class plays a difference and money plays a difference in this too. All right, and for the oppressed, the people of color, what we have to spend a lot of time on when we're talking about racial trauma and healing is unlearning internalized oppression. Question ourselves and our abilities and who we are because of that generational trauma. And that history of being oppressed. And so those are some of my main points that I want to speak about when you brought up generational trauma. Now, going back to the signs and symptoms, because we are counselors of trauma, some things that are really common, nightmares, ruminating thoughts. I know myself and someone else on this call, we're so visual and so emotional that 2 of us out of the 4 will not watch any of the videos of the killings directly because I cannot take myself there. If I take myself there, I'm going to be stuck seeing this man die. Like I can read about it, I can hear about it, but if I see it, I'm going to be so broken, right? And so that's these visual images of the event. Mood swings. When there was last year, I think it was Ahmaud Arbery, so many happens, a lot of people of color disconnected, checked out, and it was absolutely okay. But isolation, to just wrap our head around hate and why it's happening. And then think about the people the African Americans or the indigenous people, the BIPOC people who didn't have the opportunity to disconnect, who had to show up at work with these people the next day, right? And how that felt for them. How does that feel? That had to be tough. When you starting to question normalcy, you start to question your white friends, you start to question people in your circle. Like, this is trauma. Why? And this is having to do that daily, right? Takes away from positive growth and development. All right. Avoidance of activities, choosing the colleges you want to go to, choosing the soccer team. So avoidance of activities, lack of interest, feeling hopeless, which we always want to move past hopeless. We're doing this discussion today to move towards hope. But people giving up, that change will ever take place, we're never going to give up on that. But that is very true. People will feel like white people are always going to be racist. They're always going to be this. You know, this W.E.B. Du Bois said this hundreds and hundreds of years ago, that this would be the case. But feeling helpless and hopeless. Of course, the being easily startled, behavioral problems in kids. I've seen this so many times over the years, that some of our Black and brown kids start distrusting teachers, and kids don't always have the wealth of language that adults do. So they'll start to misbehave or disconnect. But really, they're trying to express that I see something on TV going on between white people and Black people, and I don't like it. So I'm gonna treat the white teacher real mean, right? And the white teacher's like, oh my God, but I didn't do it, type of thing. But kids are only communicating how they know, and usually that's through their behavior. And so that's how to pick up on trauma or vicarious trauma taking place within children. Irritability, anxiety, panic attacks. And going back to irritability, the angry Black woman phenomena. Oh man, like, can we just tonight just put that to sleep? Because if I'm thinking correctly, shouldn't everybody be angry over violence, hate, and killing? Is that anything to be really excited about? Right? And so when you hear that, I just want everybody in the audience to just question, isn't that very logical, right? For a person to be angry because people are getting killed. Children are getting killed by police for being innocent, shot from the back. You know, and that should make everybody a bit upset. Okay.